So most companies don't actually have a marketing problem. They think they do, but they don't. They have a clarity problem, a leadership problem, a story problem. Instead of fixing that, they just keep creating more content, running more ads, doing more tactics. Today, we're going to get into what's actually broken inside companies and how to fix them. Jenny, I want to start here. What do people actually have wrong?
Ooh, you know what? Well, hi. Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. So I like to look at a combination of things, not only what they are doing wrong, but from a marketing perspective, we like to start where, and this is going to be hopefully any marketer, every marketer starts from a place of what's working really well. So to your point, yes, I do believe that folks, founders, executive level, they do feel, particularly in an industry where we're deeply impacted by price compression and thin margins, what they hope for is that there is an answer and there's a resolve in marketing. I'm the former VP of strategy for one of the largest, if not the largest, business outcomes focused agency. So I got to see a lot of different businesses throughout the supply chain in multiple markets, and had the opportunity to kind of dig in pretty deeply under the hood, particularly working with executives to understand better that the problem wasn't marketing. Really,
Yeah.
when we're talking about what those larger issues are, unseen inefficiencies. That's probably one of the biggest. You've brought in a team, a tech stack, or you're working with a series of vendors, and there's inefficiencies from, again, I like to call it the supply chain, but basically from the goal component down to the strategies for growth, down to sales, marketing, all the way down to some of those more specific channels and tactics. And so, just like we are with as humans, sometimes we don't like to look at the darker shadow sides of our own personal being. In the same way, companies very much are doing the same thing. So unseen inefficiencies, I would say, is usually part of the larger picture. The secondary piece is really like a misaligned strategy. So where we like to start, of course, is at the top level with goals, organizational revenue goals, expansion goals, a goal to ultimately exit in 3 years, whatever that looks like. What I have found time and again is when you ask executives, what are the goals, not only for 2026, the next 2 years, the next 5 years, there's often some misalignment. That misalignment comes from a place of, again, the human element component, thinking like this company is this thing. Then you ask another executive, they're like, I think this company is this thing. And then that's how you start to see how you may have some misaligned strategies. My first, I would say, client organization that I worked with within the cannabis space was very interesting. There were two very strong factions. One wanted to work in the big ag space. This is for hemp seed genetics. Big ag versus craft cannabis. Like, I don't know if you could be any different. So you can imagine that the goal alignment with two very different identities looked nothing like what it should have. The third piece, and I'm a big fan of threes, so I'll try not to speak the whole time in terms of threes, but under-leveraged assets. So that's what I was kind of saying back to the original, like, unseen inefficiencies. We have tech stacks that are fairly crappy in the cannabis space, to be honest. What we have access to, we're a little hamstrung, and we've, I've got plenty of platform partners, software partners, and when I say crappy, it's nothing personal, but it is when we look in comparison with what industries outside of regulated cannabis and the unregulated hemp products, what they have access to. So it's not to be, I'm not picking on anyone. I think we're all in the same understanding that what we would have access to if we were talking about a regulated CPG product would be quite different. So when we're thinking through under-leveraged assets, it's everything from tech stack to people, processes, tools, all those components. So that's usually where it is. And poor marketing managers, they kind of get like, hey, this problem is getting slapped on you, when it really is something more intricate. That was a long answer.
It was super. Yeah, it was great because it's interesting because like I wanted to get into a little bit of that. You know, you work in some unique industries, and I know that you can explain it a little bit better than I can on the types of industries that you work with. But going back to you know, like the hemp industry and hemp bev and so on. It's funny because I just talked with a startup yesterday, and they're a totally different startup. They're an AI startup, but I look at a lot of these hemp bev specifically. They're startups, right? Or even some of them that are bigger. But there's a lot of different things that I see. You know, where it is. It's what you said kind of before, where you're like, well, I don't want to pick on anybody, but you know, there's a lot of room for growth, or they could be doing things differently, and they can, and it's not, you know, it's sometimes it's because like, I don't want to say overnight things exploded for them, but some of them, things are moving pretty fast, right? And we see this consistently where people will ask for video, but they don't really know like what story they're trying to tell. Or, you know, Monday they're trying to tell one story, but then some things have shifted. And then the next thing you know, by Friday or the next week, they want to tell a completely different story. And, you know, trying to hone back in and get the focus and really understand, you know, what are your core values and who is your audience and who are you really trying to connect with within that audience, and to not, you know, dilute what it is that you're trying to do. I think is really important. And if you don't have the right leadership involved, you're kind of constantly changing a lot of those things, right?
Well, to be fair, the leaders are tasked with some impossible asks, I think, when we look at, and this is outside of the cannabis space. So it's, you know, pressures are mounting. I know you just had a nice, long, healthy conversation on AI recently. You know, so those pressures are mounting as well. And you know, I was talking with an organization that was going from a single state operating entity into a multi-state operating entity, an MSO. And I said, let's kind of fortify our framework, because we're about to step into some high pressure situations. And as long as we have those guardrails to protect us around decision making, where we might get tempted to be reactionary, or, you know, I was like, we're going to get pressure cooked, and the cracks that are small little hairline fractures at this point, they're about to turn from stress fractures into compound fractures. So let's rethink the infrastructure and get really tight before we expand. Because, I mean, to my point just a second ago, like leadership is under significant pressure. So kind of taking emotion out of decision making and taking, you know, there's going to be external risks and things out of our control.
What kind of pressure does an MSO, like what things are they going to have?
It depends on which component of it. So there's, you know, in the regulated market, and we can go beyond cannabis as well if you want to go beyond that industry.
Sure.
But, you know, there's a lot of folks are dealing with, you know, reciprocity. There are a lot of folks are dealing with unpaid bills, managing debt, inefficiencies operationally on the inside framework, where who actually owns this decision and what is the team that's going to execute. So at the very least, and you know, when I think about MSOs in particular in the cannabis industry, it is this hard place to be, but a very slow moving blob that kind of takes over. I don't know when you were born, Joe, but I was born in the late 70s, where we would watch the blob, and that red thing that would kind of overtake, and you were like, oh, here it comes. I know it's coming. Decisions aren't made quickly, and there's really no form to it. But here it comes, eating all the mom and pops.
The Blob. That's great. I remember that movie. Yeah. I'm a product
And
of
do you
that.
remember,
So
you remember how frightening it was? It was the slowest. I mean, you could clearly outrun that darn thing, or it would seem. But for some reason, I don't know, you'd get distracted doing some errands, and all of a sudden it was creeping underneath your door frame, and before you knew it.
yeah, you were gone.
Part of the blob.
Well, listen, we have a lot to talk about, but like I actually want to talk about, you know, I know you're building something new, you know, so, you know, why don't you talk a little bit about that? You know, maybe like starting from this idea of gold.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. Also,
Yeah.
I would love to talk about it. It's an evolving entity. It is
Hmm.
co-founded by myself and a dear colleague who was the former CMO of Charlotte's Web, little known brand, right? So
Yeah.
Colin Glom
Yeah.
is my business partner. We launched Theodo here in the last few weeks, very much along those same lines of this conversation, which is its executive level strategic advisory. We step into an organization with the notion that these businesses that we start come from a place of gold.
Mm.
When external factors happen and the market pressure happens and we grow in size without kind of a more strategic lens for what that next chapter looks like, what we find in multiple industries, probably across the board, is that revenue flattens, growth
Mm.
stops. Everything that you did to get you from point A to point B and had a period of growth starts to plateau. And you may be doing the same things or more things, and nothing is really changing. So revenue continues to be flat. Your expansion plan just doesn't suit the entity that you have become. So what Deoro does is, again, always starting from a place of gold, getting
Hmm.
back to what is the core of who you are and who you came to be in a particular industry. What is your unique value proposition and how are you positioned to actually serve a greater purpose within the market that you're serving? So when I ask for goals of an organization, I love to hear revenue helps. That gives me a framework of, okay, you're a growth phase, maintenance phase, you're
Mm.
growing this much, whatever your expectation is. But I really love to hear what is it that you came to do with this entity and why do we need it as a larger community? So what Deodo does is really kind of creates a notion for let's go back to that place of gold and
Yeah.
how are we really impacting the industry to move it in a positive direction. The way that we've done business up until now, 2026, doesn't
Mm.
necessarily have to be the way we do business 6 months from now, next year. We can rewrite what MSO equals. We can
Oh.
rewrite the way that brands operate with retailers, and perhaps they come to the table as a true business partner who is truly vested in one another's growth because we have a vision for this industry growing in a positive way to better serve as many as we can. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's us in a nutshell.
No. Yeah. No, I love it. So, I mean, it's funny because like that is like sort of storytelling at its core, right? Like helping people reconnect with what they actually are or who they actually are. Going back to what you said about, companies sort of like they lose that growth or they drift away from maybe what made them successful. What are some of the early signs that you see when you see a company like losing that?
Yeah, in leadership, what you'll often see there's kind of different there's things you can measure. So you
Hmm.
might find that the leaders are making decisions that seem somewhat out of character. So perhaps they're pressured by
Mm.
a very flat bottom line, and they're looking for answers outside of the entity. I strongly believe that these entities that we build are living, breathing things just like we are as people. And
Yeah.
when it comes that time where you hit a plateau in growth, the answer really isn't outside of ourselves, and the answer really isn't outside of our entities. So it
Mm.
takes that kind of like, well, we've got to take a peek inside and have a systematic way to analyze. For us at the Oro, we have a 9 block system, and it covers everything from objectives and key results to sales, marketing, finance, kind of 9 different categories where we start to take a deeper dive. So yeah, if you as a leader, or you notice your leadership starting to make some decisions that feel a little uncharacteristic or a little bit off of the vision of who you knew the entity to be,
Mhm.
that's usually it's a pretty good read. The easiest though is flat revenue.
But I was going to actually ask you that, like, because when we talked, you had mentioned something about like the founder's dilemma, and what happens when founders start chasing revenue over vision. So if there's anything, and I don't know if that's where you were kind of going, but if you can kind of, you know,
Yeah, it's certainly one of 10 plus different things. But yeah, often with the founder's dilemma is there's really not strategic focus. This is more so, and it's usually in the early stages of an organization where the founder is not wanting to leave a dollar on the table, but making the decision to, okay, if I'm leaving this dollar on the table to go chase that one, it's that there's an opportunity cost. So if I want $5 now versus $50, next week, that's a decision. And that decision should be made within those confines of a guardrail strategy that kind of says,
right.
okay, if I'm going to do this thing and say yes to that, I'm saying no to that, and here's why. That's where it starts to. That's what I'm saying. Like that decision making gets really hard. But from like a founder's dilemma viewpoint, it's like, which thing should I do? Who should I be
Right.
today? Well, that person, that looks like I'm going to have an easier time closing business there. It's a little bit off of what I planned to do, but it's money now. So then you start to see this kind of floundering between multiple things, or an inability to really focus on, okay, Q2, I'm just going to nail these two things. Q3, that's going to build into, the next plan that's going to prep me for the following year. So founder's dilemma is often, and, I went through it upon my departure from the agency. I thought, there were I was very fortunate to have many opportunities land in my lap. So it was everything from folks saying, come do biz dev for us,
Yeah.
come start
Yeah.
a business with me, come,
Yeah.
start a new agency, come into this brand full time. So I was very fortunate, and I just thought, I need a little bit of, like at least 3 or 4 or 5 mountain runs before I can get to that place of clarity to then better understand this is exactly what I came to do, and my vision for this industry is XYZ. So yeah,
By
mountain
the
running,
way,
huh?
yeah, I was gonna say. By the way, when you say mountain running, like you literally mean that, correct? Like I might say that as like a metaphor, but I know you aren't you? I don't think you're an ultra marathoner, right? But you are, or are you? Are you an ultra
I
marathoner?
am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Boom. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So I mean, working out is like a pretty big deal to you. It's not like, it means a little something. I think. What? So walk me through what a mountain run is to you.
Yeah. I love efficiency. So I typically go up. I'll do a flatter run, but really, we're busy humans with families
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
companies and missions and all those things. So I try to get in a pretty significant uphill climb, at least 5 times a week. And I'm in Denver, and I'm really close to the Front Range, so it's a 15-20 minute drive for me. And then, yeah, so I enjoy feeling a deeper
Yeah.
heartbeat, breath, kind of all of that. It does kind of help get into a meditative state pretty quickly, versus if you're running flat. And sometimes it takes people maybe like 3 to 4 miles to get a runner's high. And I think that's why a lot of times folks are like, oh, I hate running, because they never get that endorphin hit. But I'm like, just go up. If you increased heart rate kind of fast tracks you to that place of, I'm not really thinking about what, XYZ in
Yeah.
these moments. And it's really, friends always ask me, on these longer runs, like, because some of them can run through the night, start in the morning. You watch the sunrise, you watch the
Yeah.
sunset, and sometimes you see the sunrise the next day. And so they say,
That's
what do you
wild.
think about on those runs? I'm like, to be honest, I don't think about a ton. I try not to, and just kind of let there's not to sound too hippy dippy, but there's wisdom in nature. And when you pause long enough to listen to it, we're kind of like these little, you kind of get a hit of like, oh, I'm part of something bigger.
Yeah.
My issues around figuring out what's for dinner, or who are my first 3 hires, or how am I going to close the next 2 businesses. It's, when you kind of step into that larger framework and minimize your size and yourself, you realize, wow, we really are supported by such huge things.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's why
wild.
it's very addictive.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, so when you do these, are you doing these like part of a group? Is this like a competition, or is it some of these are solo that you're just going on these?
Yeah, I mean, I do race.
Uh-huh.
I do race, and it's nice
Okay.
because those events are supported, so I don't have to carry
Yeah.
all my food and water. And if I crack a bone, I'm not, you know, in that much trouble.
Right.
But I do, a lot of my training runs are solo. I typically don't run with anybody.
Yeah, so that's cool. I didn't know that. I knew you ran. I just didn't know you did like the ultra marathons and whatnot. That is like intense. I know you work in a variety of different industries. So, um, I was thinking cannabis, hemp, CPGs, but if there's a different industry that you're sort of working within that you'd like to talk about, then we can sort of pivot as well.
Yeah, yeah. So certainly, where cannabis is where I'm known. Certainly not
Hmm.
the place that I came from. I came from the tech space.
Yeah.
I've worked certainly within the alc
Uh-huh.
sector. So
Uh-huh.
alcohol, wine, and spirits, which is now those are kind of getting blended with hemp beverage growing in the way that it is, and
Yeah.
with alc trying to figure out, is this part of our portfolio? Are we going to squash it? Can we squash it? Are we going to help it grow because it's representing 20 to 30% of our revenue? The other is health and wellness. I mean, that's a
Mm.
space that is near and dear to my heart. I, as far as working as an endurance athlete
Yeah.
among, within the industry is so different because it's really funny. It gives you a little bit of street cred within the health and wellness space. Like, what do you do is often like, not what do you do for work, but what's
Right.
your, you know, what's your minor addiction? Is it your compulsion? Is it running, biking, kayaking, climbing, skiing, snowboarding?
Yeah.
Kind of fun in that way. You end up knowing people in a really different way. Alcohol's different in that way, though. Like you really got
Alcohol.
it.
Yeah. So when you talk about like hemp and cannabis and yeah, are you focused more on the e-commerce side of it? Or are you focused more on like how the companies that you work with, how are they handling distribution?
Ooh, yeah. So if we back up a little bit in terms of how are they handling revenue stream, I think that then
Yeah.
then distribution kind of falls underneath it. So for better or worse, probably for worse, I think a lot of some of these hemp beverage folks are looking to LinkedIn to kind of map out like, ooh, that everybody's doing that thing, so I'm going to go follow that thing. And I I almost wish that we could just you build a business in the same way you do anything else in any other industry, and it has to come from a place of business maturity, kind of checking all the boxes, having the roadmap. So when we look at beverage in particular, hemp beverage in particular, particularly with the looming decisions to be made in November, kind of backing out into what are the revenue channels and most opportunistic places to be, and how do you want to position yourself. And the minute that federal hemp ban became part of the conversation, folks are
Yeah.
having to forced to think through, obviously now through the summer, where
Yeah.
beverage brands will be making some major decisions. Then through November, December,
Yep.
potentially we're looking at, how do things pivot? It's almost like you have to look at what are the possibilities of what could happen, and
Yeah.
how am I and my brand going to respond. I'm working, for example, with some folks in the Canatech space specific to hemp
Mm.
beverage who are building a
Okay.
platform to really solve. So we're breaking down, okay, if this is the channel, federal hemp ban, and now states they see it as a revenue stream. They're going to keep doors open, but they're going to add another layer of regulation on top of it. That's one channel.
Right.
It completely goes away. That's another channel.
Yeah.
And then, there's kind of variation. So for this tech platform in particular, we're walking through, how do we position you as a solution to every possible
Outcome.
outcome that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And then
That's
when you start to map it out that way, then you start to see, okay, there's some commonalities in the service that I can provide. I'm solving this larger solution for folks, and I can start building that platform. It's actually it's in the works and kind of in more of a beta stage at this point. But really, again, when you think about when you're faced with the potential of multiple outcomes and an external factor that very much is going to change how you do business. You've got a roadmap at least to know through, I would say, even through the year beyond whatever that decision is made, and then
Right.
again position yourself as a solution. And if you're not an actual solution, you might just be contributing to the pollution that's in the space.
I can't wait to hear or see like what you are developing within that, because that's pretty exciting. We had an e-commerce client that did go through regulation that they did ban. It was a different product, and it was just like it was always looming that it would happen, and then like it literally, pretty much overnight, there was a flavor ban on a particular type of topic or product, and that was it. It was gone, and they really were not in a position to really recover from that. And I've been to some of these conferences, and kind of going back to what you said, or you kind of said a little bit, like everybody kind of gets on a bandwagon on a certain way or a certain story and so on. And it's like, I don't see it as much anymore, but I would see a lot of brands coming up with like this narrative from a hemp perspective, where it was like, oh, this is a healthier alternative. And, I didn't I work a lot in tech, a lot in legal, and it opened up a lot of questions when you were to go through as a healthy alternative versus just an alternative. And you can market it, you can market that as a marketer, you can market it as an alternative in a great, fun way, a fun alternative. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but as soon as you say healthy, I mean, I don't know. I'm one of those like, I'm one of those, like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not trained or anything like that, but I think too much of anything is probably not going to be a good idea, right?
Right, right. This reminds me of when you were asking, like, what are some of those signs that besides flat revenue,
Right.
really kind of what are some signals of a system that could be better optimized? And a lot of that comes down to almost like what I would call like a top of funnel failure. So there's a failure to kind of be bringing folks into an organization or into a brand in particular, where, ideally what you do through that funnel is you're optimally evolving someone from a customer to a loyal customer to a brand evangelist who is ultimately going to do some of the marketing for you. So
Right.
in, hemp beverage, in every CPG industry, it's like, if you are everything to everyone, you're really no one. You're nothing to nobody. And so that's where, again, just as, one of those signals when you start to see like, top of funnel looks a bit different than it used to. And now I'm really not really sure who I'm serving. And I certainly don't have any brand evangelists who are like, these are my gung-ho consumers. I think, you think about love brands like Southwest Airlines, no matter what, some folks are gonna book on Southwest, whether they recently added, now you've got a reserve seat or whatever it looks like. So that's ultimately what you're trying to do with brands as an organization, with your own brand, is you want to not only create a loyal following, but you do want to create some, like, there's some love there that you know. Think about like Coca-Cola. It's like, if we loved Coca-Cola because it's soda and it's a cola, is that really enough? They've done such a solid job on marketing. Like, Coca-Cola equals joy. Okay, now I'm investing in joy, although it's highly like the inflammation component of the sugar, all those pieces, right?
I was gonna say, right,
So
like Coca-Cola, they're not going, it's a healthier alternative. Like, we know it's still at some way not, it's probably not like, moderation, right? Anyway, I didn't want to get into like what you shouldn't say or whatnot, but you make a great example of, they're a great example of building a brand, and when the whole sound of opening the can and how you do feel, I think, joy and whatever. I'm not a big soda fan, but I understand the marketing behind it. So, why do you think there's so many of these companies that are maybe struggling to differentiate themselves?
it's the same reason that we don't look more deeply at ourselves, I think, or sometimes we avoid or go into autopilot. Like, I've always said like the strategy piece isn't sexy. It's the outcomes that really are. But if you take the time to build that foundational component of a business, and then scale from there, it really does make the whole entity more solid and less prone to, floppy revenue or who are we today? And now we're adding another component to our business that's actually not who we are, but it's another revenue stream.
Right.
So,
Right. And I do think it was specifically within cannabis and hemp. It's an industry that could really utilize a lot of education that is not necessarily a marketing component, but that there is a huge audience that is really uneducated to a lot of to the dosages, to how the effects, to just a lot of different stuff. I'm in New Jersey, so it's legal in you can go to a liquor store and you can see all the products and whatnot, but there's very little education on any of it. And there's a lot of people in my age group that are buying these products that really don't understand a lot of it,
yeah, I think the more that the stigma becomes peeled back and removed, that the education piece, you think about the bartenders who are serving, let's say, I was just in Miami, and that they are having to read the customer before they pull up the bar stool and understand. Like, they don't know what prescription drugs they've been taking. They don't know what they've done the day before. They don't know how much they've had to drink for the most part. There's kind of those signals that those folks, hospitality folks, are trained to kind of pick up on. But in the same way, now look at something like cannabis, and it's like, there is an onus for us, I think, to educate, but at the end of the day, a lot of that onus is on the consumer.
Yeah.
And I'm, of course, educating on terpenes and all of that. Yes, the layperson's not going to know, but it's very easy to find that information out, or it's very easy to better understand what 5 milligrams is going to do if you're not used to having any milligrams. So I do think, as an industry, we have this major, and maybe this is the unpopular thing to say, but you've got to think about, this is an adult intoxicant. And just as a bartender or a restaurant owner or a server is having to analyze and say, okay, I'm going to serve you this thing, but there's a deal here. Like, there's an unspoken deal that you haven't had, 10 drinks before you came in here, and you're going to ask me to serve you another. Or if you're taking a medication that you're not supposed to mix with alcohol, it's not on me, bartender. That's on you, consumer, to really, those are adult decisions around intoxicants. So I think in some ways, as an industry, we're like, education. Yes, I do think there's a component, but what we don't talk about is there's also a component of onus on the consumer themselves. That's outside if we're talking about access for young folks to high dose products. That's a different conversation.
No, that's different. No, I mean, yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. I mean, in addition to, if you have a customer that's going to a store and they're looking at making a purchase on something, this is their opportunity to give that particular customer the best experience possible so that they can buy more. Right?
Sure.
And so they can make additional purchases and so on and so forth. So anyway, I just felt like there's something, there's like a missing component to like, for somebody that maybe might want to know a little bit more on how to like utilize some of those things.
Yeah. So. Certainly. It's like having a little, I feel like sometimes a bud tender is like a little mini pre-shaman, because they're like, okay, let me steer you in the direction of based on what you came in for. And based on your skill level.
Totally.
Yeah. So let me guide you.
All right, let's talk a little bit about like AI and maybe AI versus human thinking, or like I kind of like to kind of go more like a collaboration. I'm obsessed with AI. Us as Producify, like we're using. We have a whole bunch of different like AI editing processes and services that we do. But you had mentioned that you're working with some sort of, you didn't say AI, but you said tech, and there's a lot of like crossover. So what kind of like AI programs that you might be using, or past references, and or where you see it going in the future.
I'm going to throw out a blanket statement that I've been trying on for size, which is AI is leveraging known information from this point behind us. There's value in that. If we're looking at building a strategy that's going to take us beyond what has been done into new realms, if we are courageous enough to make larger changes in the industries in which we work, does the answer lie in AI? It may be a combination of kind of that human element where the visionary should always be human, and there are there's subcategories of support, but it's an interesting time right now to raise up. My daughter is 14, and it's an interesting time to raise her in an era of verification. Is this true, what I'm seeing? Is this a real narrative? Is this a real image? Is this a real person that I've been communicating with? One of my clients, who's a cultivator out of Massachusetts, was like, oh, I've got this new engagement, a new situation in how we're doing business with the dispensary. And I really needed an application for them to place an order in real time to create a manifest based on the flower that they specifically wanted. So he spent, a handful of hours building a tool that solves a lot of unique problems that he was trying to solve for. So heck yeah, absolutely. Right. So there's different ways to leverage. But again, I start from this place of we are the visionaries of our own entities and of our own organizations, and where we want to see an industry or a sector or a company to go. AI can help support it, but we, almost like on a soul level, we have to have a better understanding of what we came here to do. And then there's AI to really help us get there faster and more efficiently, probably cheaper.
It's funny. It's because it's like when we think of, I was just talking to somebody about this, when we explain AI, it's so easy for me to explain it from a visual. Like, oh, that character, that's not a real person. That was like, that was created on a computer, right? Or, the cute videos that you see on YouTube of like the animals doing this like crazy thing, those are not real. But then it's like the tangible things of like what you're talking about with the grower and the dispensary, and being able to put the processes in place or coding and whatnot within to make distribution better, and so on and so forth.
This cultivator in particular, he's got the vision of where he wants his brand to go and how he's going to better serve the Massachusetts market to healthfully grow it, and then take that operation and scale it across multiple states, or just totally own Massachusetts. And so when he's got the vision for his organization and then can apply, like, I didn't even know I could build a platform, but I just built a platform that solves 50 of the 55 problems, and I made it in 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, whatever. That's really powerful.
Super powerful. And I would imagine growing is going to be way more efficient, way more, they're going to have less waste and so on, just by utilizing some of these processes. And I'm excited to see where they go.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff. Cooking, that's been one of the greatest silver linings, I think, of this new chapter of where I'm taking Deoro. Is really fun to provide some scalability and also some, hey, let's just sit down and bounce some ideas around, because I've seen a lot of businesses do a lot of different things well, and more do some things not so well. And here's here's where we could take the next chapter. It's a really, the times are calling for us to change how we're doing business, to change how we're, even living our day-to-day lives. Particularly if you're raising kids too. You're getting forced to like get really sharp on what your family values are, because they get tested. I'll just say within our household, they get especially with my daughter's 14 and stepping into new environments. I'm like, this is what we do as a family. This is great. This is not great. This is,
it's
all
tough.
Underneath this element of like, I'm not looking for full control. So.
Right. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, and it is really tough. My wife and I didn't put crazy limitations on a lot of their stuff until kind of recently. Then I have to earn everything, right? So it's like if you have the right grades, then you might still have like certain sort of unlimitedness, if you will. But if not, then you're pretty limited. And it's crazy when the limitations happen. They become these like wild kids in a good way, not in a bad way. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's like, what the heck is this? Like I haven't
Yeah.
seen my house crazy like this in quite a long time. And it's literally just because the gaming system is not allowed to be on.
I wish that we could frame it as, instead of a treat or a reward, that we could frame it as a punishment. Because if when my daughter was young, she was in a Waldorf school through 7th grade, and it's a very low technology curriculum. If not,
Yeah.
particularly up until 8th grade, there's no technology. I mean, of course, COVID happened and
Right.
blew the doors off of that situation. But
Yep.
yeah, I think as we, if we like how we position it in their minds too, is it's for us, who are on computers and on our devices for the work that we do. What a treat it is for us to be, skiing midweek, or out on a long run, or out like that. Like that's the treat, not this tether to technology in some ways.
It's fun. It's funny you say that because it's not just the kids, right? It's the same thing. Like I'm definitely, you know, I'm definitely on my phone too much for reading things that there's just no reason to put my time into, right? It's like what you
Yeah,
said before. If you're saying yes to this, you're saying no to that. And so
right.
if I'm on
Yeah.
my phone and saying yes to that, what am I saying no to?
Well, and there's value in disconnection sometimes too. Like
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
we have big days as adults, and sometimes you just want a little brainless respite. So there's maybe the brainless respite is like it's the endless scroll through some garbage.
Well,
I certainly scroll endlessly through garbage at some component of my day.
oh, yeah, and there, like you said, I think sometimes that's healthy, but then whatever, to each their own. At times it could be, at least maybe not, but we're sort of entering this world where it's hard to tell what's real, right? So how does that affect like storytelling? Where do you see that?
Ooh, well, I mean the if you think back to when our kids were young, and the ways that stories were told in school, it was probably in a circle where the children are facing each other, and there's someone telling the story, maybe with a picture book, maybe with not. And then
Right.
as those kids get older, and those stories that were shared are among two people, or it's a very human interaction. And as we evolve into storytelling to today, into adulthood, and to exactly the adulthood that we're experiencing right now, our tolerance of a longer story is pretty freaking short. So we're like,
Yeah.
give me the story in 30
Oh,
seconds or I'm out. Give me the story in 10 seconds or I'm out. Like, and there's something great to be lost, without having the endurance to actually, hear a story for a long period of time.
but Jenny, that's it. I get that question all the time, and it's, oh, well, people have lost attention spans, and we don't have attention spans anymore. And I get the, I had somebody that was like, well, our 30-second video didn't connect enough because it's too long, and people don't have attention spans for that. And so we need to make it like 15 seconds, or maybe we can make it like 5. And I'm like, no, the issue is that the content sucked right from the get-go, or the message wasn't really strong enough, or the whatever the piece of content that you're trying to show didn't have the right hooks, right? So maybe you were doing a 60-second video, but it was a 60-second video with like 5 topics. But why are you showing 5 topics? Show one, and really define what that one is, and then give another piece of content. I think what people don't have attention spans for is that there's so much content out there now that they only want to see what they want to see.
Right now I'm reading Salman Rushdie's book, Knife,
Oh,
on his attempted assassination. And I'm in this part of the book. It's nearing the end. He just had an imaginary conversation with a young man who tried to kill him. I don't know if you're familiar with exactly what
Oh
happened
yeah.
in Chihuahua, but yeah. So he has this imaginary conversation. It's wild. All the things that he would like to say and how he thinks this young man's going to respond. And now I'm in the section of the book where he's kind of digesting what that conversation would have been, and he's talking about the role of storytelling in very challenging times right now. And his point is the journalists or the storytellers of today are sometimes the greatest snapshot and wisest because they're gathering what's going on and they're telling a story that we can look back on 2 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road to have a better understanding of like, wow, those were the times. And here's what starts to happen when we don't shift those big ick things that are happening in the world. So it's, the value of storytelling isn't entertainment necessarily when you look at, again, the larger, what and how we are evolving or devolving as a human race. The value of story is, I mean, I could go on for days about it. You could probably go on for days about the value of
Yeah.
story. But it's so, I don't know if it's sad or annoying or equal parts in both, but when someone's like, I don't have time for the 30-second video, that's maybe the nature of the content isn't worth the 30 seconds, but
Yeah.
if we've kind of lost an endurance muscle to listen to a story, like how that's quite sad.
Well, yes, I agree, but I don't think it is that. I don't think it is the attention spans. I think it's just oversaturated, and there's just so much.
Just like with marketing, there's
Right.
there's an emotion that we are attempting to draw out of the person who's on the other end of a brand campaign or a story or a video, or there is the human component that we're trying to emote something from them. And I think that's part of the larger, has to be part of a larger strategy, not only really understanding the target audience and content that's going to be relevant and exciting for them or where they may want to engage. I think about this was years ago, there was a North Face commercial targeting me.
Right.
And it
Right.
was all these different outdoor activities played to This Land Is Your Land, Woody
Wow.
Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land. And there's a moment, and I get teary even just describing it. And I don't know why, but there's a moment in the video where there's people jumping over a barbed wire fence, and they're just going to run wild and in the land or whatever. And there's that juxtapositioned against this herd of buffalo who are at, like full sprint, and they move beautifully together and kind of take a wide turn. And there's something about that is just like, yes, I'll buy the North Face coat.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
That's
like here,
lifestyle, lifestyle to like a T, right?
Yeah,
Those
totally.
lifestyle videos, they get you. Whatever the lifestyle is that you're, they've gotten me, and it sounds like they really know their brand, right? It's North Face,
Yeah.
so they got it,
Yeah.
and they know their market.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it
And
is,
I'm like, show me a herd of buffalo and I'm in.
yeah, right. If there's anything like strategy versus tactics, why do people stay stuck in tactics instead of strategy? I know, like
Yeah.
you have some good points on that.
Yeah. Cannabis is an example here, but this applies. This is applicable to multiple markets where
Okay.
we are reactionary by nature, particularly as executives, when we're looking at, okay, here are the revenue projections, or here was our expansion plan, and we're on track to hit that, or we're not. So we tend to react. That probably the largest piece that should shift is how are you actually leading the market versus reacting to it. And again, this is 100% relevant in the cannabis space where consumers are shopping by price, and it's impacting everything. The way that we've trained the consumer to shop. This is a CPG product, but the way that we've trained consumers to shop is the very thing that is putting businesses out of business. So I would say the strongest one of the strongest things to start to understand and overcome is that reactionary nature and just how to be resilient. We have to pivot on a dime in some cases, but the value of that larger strategy is that is how you're going to lead the market versus react to it. And that's, again, where the human component comes in, where like, what is your vision for an organization? What is your vision for your state or the industry or whatever that looks like? How are you going to lead the charge? Because what is your product or brand really worth? And maybe we're not talking about life-changing, Coke's not going to change my life,
Right.
or whatever is that unique value proposition. Build that into, remember that when you're building a strategy to actually do something super cool.
What conversations do you think are missing in there?
I've never
What,
thought about it. That's a fun exercise. Yeah, that's a fun exercise. I think one of the, again, this is sort of under the umbrella of business development as it relates to sales and marketing. One of the conversations that is often missing is that marketing should function in service to sales. So where you typically in an organization have two very strong voices and teams to support each of those voices, and there's not a coherent relationship. It really should be the marketer who sits in on the weekly pipeline call with the sales team so that they can hear, this is what I'm up against. This is my pipeline. This is my delta and how I'm going to close. But these are my challenges within the space. This is what I didn't close and what I did close. That should be very interesting to the marketer who is actually servicing that team member or that sales team, so that they're softening the soil, so that when that salesperson jumps into an opportunity to close new business or expand on existing business, it's closing is done 95 to 100% of the time. So the marketing is a support role.
Right.
And so the conversation that's missing, I think, in leadership is these two entities, they need to be one entity, and they need to kind of have really strong respect, understanding both of the opportunities and challenges so that they can work together, because that's the engine that's going to power the strategy that gets you from point A to point B.
And they should. I mean, any of the companies that I've worked with where, marketing and sales are they are parallel, they are working together. When one doesn't respect the other one, that usually comes down from the top, and it is it's not a good situation to be in, because they do work hand in hand, and they should be listening to each other. They're in it together, and they are both an asset. It's when they both do well, they both look really well, and
well, there's more revenue.
Right, and it's hard to
Bigger
say,
budgets.
you can't say one is doing great and the other one's doing terribly. It doesn't usually work that way. So, we didn't really kind of get into, I don't know if it's something that you want to, but and it would, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with like strategy, tactics, or maybe some storytelling, but like advocacy, right? Just speaking back to like the whole, we opened a little bit with like the hemp, and how these are things that might be going away like pretty soon, right? And then and if it's not going to be then, there could be teams to try to pull that back after that. So like, what about advocacy? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'll speak to it more so in the regulated market, because the advocacy component of the hemp beverage space is very fractured. It's because there's a different root of why those brands came to be versus the regulated market. And so because of that, I think there's a very fractured effort.
What do you mean by that, by the way? Like why they came about?
Here we go for unpopular statement number 2. It's, that I came from the hemp space.
Okay.
Hemp genetics. This is before D9 was D8, D9, D10 were part of a regular conversation. I do not believe that the product should exist in the way that it does as far as an intoxicant, when you have a regulatory framework for manufacturing, cultivating, selling, buying that product. So what that loophole that was created, advantageous in some ways and perilous in others, what the government asks for is, in many ways, the self-governance around consumer safety. That's what it's saying, is like, if you're not coming to the table with a plan for consumer safety, then we're gonna apply one on top of you, and you're gonna have to operate in this way. So when I say that the foundation of what the hemp intoxicant industry is, it's I do believe that folks had dollar signs in their eyes, just as they did in the regulated space. But there isn't always a tie to the plant as much as there is in other areas. This is probably the most unpopular thing I've ever said. So, So here we go.
No, but it's fascinating. I like hearing
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I think, and I don't think that you're alone in the way you think. I don't know how unpopular it is.
Yeah, well, and I came from that space. I mean, I was working
Right.
with a farmer first organization that was, yes, their industrial hemp was a component. CBD, smokable flower, was a component. This is before we were talking about hemp as an intoxicant. So when
Right.
we fast forward into what is the value of advocacy, those folks need to hop on over to join the ranks of the regulated market, who are deeply impacted by a regulatory framework that is, in many ways, makes the difference between being profitable and in the red. So there has to be this unified conversation around a plant. The farther you get away from the core of what that plant is, D9,
Yeah.
you're inviting stricter regulation, because you're no longer sugarcane, you're no longer, winter squash. Now you're something more. So
Right.
we have to have sophistication around even like supply chain assurity, which in the hemp beverage space, it's a very new industry, and those frameworks are not not as prevalent as you might see if you look at cannabis as a crop. So, but the advocacy piece is, for anyone who's working in the regulated market, or on all these markets, there should be a component of your day-to-day or your quarterly plans or your annual plans that is specific to advocacy, because that's, what are you in it for? Like,
Right.
if you're in it to make a buck, then sure, I think that's a strong component of it. But you've got to be at the front lines of educating lawmakers around, those folks don't know the day-to-day of cultivation or, a hemp beverage. We've got to it's on us to really educate them in a way that is a very unified message. But it's, it should be very much a part of the P&L. Like, and here's where we are members of the NCIA, or here's where we're members of XYZ. It just has to be in this space.
And is it unified?
Not in the least.
No.
Not in the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard, but it is, I think what the loophole created was, if anything, that the loophole created was some validation that people like to get high. Not, people will say, like, oh, the toothpaste is out of the tube. I always get those sayings wrong, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sure, yes. But at the end of the day, like, it relaxes, it calms, it can do more than that. But what
Yeah.
what the hemp beverage category did was it really kind of opened up a wider audience to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to ditch the glass of Chardonnay. I'm going to have a low-dose beverage that's sessionable. I'm going to
Right.
sleep well, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
be completely feeling like crap when I have to make the kids lunch in the morning.
They've done a really good job with those beverages. I can say that. They definitely have a place. So I don't know how
Yeah.
that's going to like flush out, whether that's just going to be a cannabis thing,
Yeah.
and not a hemp thing. You're way more involved in that stuff than I am, so I don't. I think know of it more of a bit of it as a consumer than where I do see that. I see that the cannabis industry pivoting a bit more towards some beverages.
Yeah, certainly it's an interesting conversation in the regulated space, but in the alcohol space, big box liquor stores, it's a very interesting conversation. And I think we will arrive at a solution that gets us. I do think that this category will continue to grow in a very positive way, and I do
Yeah.
think that it serves a role, as much as there's still a divide between the regulated industry and the hemp.
I took a lot of your time. Thank you so much for being on here. Just kind of, I know we already talked a little bit about, but if there's anything like your next chapter, I know you're like stepping into
Yeah.
something new. Like if you want to talk about anything like what you're building or what problems you're like most excited to solve.
Yeah. Deodo is, Spanish word of gold, built on the notion that when we launch these businesses and start these businesses, it is from a place of gold, and that there is some work that we have yet to do once we hit those revenue plateaus or whatever that plateau might look like for an organization, that really is an examination, a self-examination back on, like I said, kind of those nine blocks, those 9 tiers of let's move toward operational excellence. Let's make the most of the resources and let's get pretty solid on the strategy and vision of, like I said, what we came here to do and how we're going to get there.
Oh, that's awesome. I think like the biggest takeaway from this conversation is like most companies think they need clarity, alignment, better understanding of who they are and where they're going. This was awesome. I really appreciate your time. And
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my pleasure. I enjoyed every minute of it.